Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat Podcast. Yes, we are back again. And yes, we are still only in May, but there is so much going on. That is why I've got very special guest Josh Hughes back with us. Of course, channel regular, broadcast journalist and sports social media executive with the Daily Mail. Josh, I said to you just off air there, when we get talking about Spurs and when we get talking about football, they are long podcasts and they are long conversations. But first of all, how are you?
Yeah, good. I think it's weird because, I think by the end of the season, we all felt we needed it. And what's it take? We've been to Australia in a pointless friendly, but a couple of days later, I feel like I'm ready for Tottenham back again. I think that's how it all. No, this summer is going to be a good break, needed for the club, big summer. And I don't know about you, but I'm buzzing for the Euros now.
Absolutely. Of course, we've got the Euros in between the seasons. Of course, and Postecoglou will be on TV, being one of the pundits at the Euros. That's going to be interesting. Josh, first of all, let me get your thoughts on the 2023-2024 season. I think a lot of people would have taken a fifth place finish. I know Andrew said many times he wouldn't have taken fifth, but I think a lot of the fans would have taken fifth. Out of the League Cup, in the first game against Fulham, Andrew made all those changes. Out of the FA Cup early against Manchester City at home. No European football this season, but a fifth place finish, Europa League for next season. How would you assess overall the season? Are you happy?
I'm actually feeling a little bit mixed about it because on one hand, I think this is massive progress for us. We were out of Europe. We're back in Europe. I predicted fifth at the start of the season, as you'll remember.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased with that overall. But I think where it is a little bit disheartening is, I suppose, the end to the season. We fell away, and of course we finished strong and we comfortably win at one of the relegated teams. It seems to be a story on repeat with Spurs. It just felt like we could have got that fourth place. We really could have got Champions League football. But again, there's a part of me that I suppose, and Ange probably will hate me and I won't be his kind of person for it. But, at the extent of Arsenal not winning the league, I'm kind of content with this situation. And I think one of the things that I look at when I look at going into Europa League versus Champions League is this new format. And now we've got, for people that aren't aware, the Europa League format follows the Champions League format, expanded teams. There is a league format, but there is no drop downs from the Champions League. Now, in previous seasons, we've had a kind of round of 32 where the third place teams from the Champions League groups drop into the Europa League and play those runners up of the groups in the Europa League. Now we're not going to have that. It's going to be a straight league situation, 4 games at home, 4 games away. Spurs will be in pot 1 for that. And when I look at the teams, and weirdly, now that United, and this is a really interesting situation because Man United have this ongoing kind of situation with Nice and the ownership with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and vested interests. So they may not even be allowed into the Europa League. Let's assume that they sort it out and it's fine. It's still, for me, a better option than Chelsea. And when I look at the rest of the teams that are in there, we really should have a chance to win that. And for where I'm at, I think, the upset of not finishing fourth, perhaps, when I felt like we really could have done, given that things were so bad in the summer and we've sold the best striker in the world, not replaced him, had an awful injury crisis, as a number of teams did have, but it seemed to really kill that momentum that we had. To then come back and still get into Europe when pundits had us finishing 9th, 10th, and actually pretty comfortably in the end, getting that 5th spot. I'm pretty pleased. And I look at next season with optimism and think, do you know what? For this to be a long-term project, we're told this is a project. So for this to be a project, for Postecoglou to have got better points tallies than I think Jurgen Klopp did in his first 38 games, better than Arteta did at Arsenal, and these are teams that we're looking to be like. I'm pretty pleased with that. And I think now, next season, we have to go all out in the Europa League and look to go one better in the Premier League as well.
Josh, there's so many things there I want to pick you up on. I think that it's going to be a long conversation this evening. There's so many things I want to talk about. Ange Postecoglou, of course, I was in Australia last week in Melbourne, and every single Australian Spurs fan speaks so highly of Ange. They are expecting big things at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, and most people I spoke to are expecting Ange to be the next manager that is going to lift the trophy at Spurs. You mentioned trophies just 4 minutes in to this podcast, which is it's fantastic, by the way. What have you made of the job that he has done? Because I know that we're going to talk about transfers heavily during this podcast this evening. But, when you look at the 2 transfer windows that he has had, I think they've been pretty decent. It's very, very obvious that Ange Postecoglou wants business done early, which is music to the ears of all of us Spurs fans, because, over the years, we're so used to waiting right until the very end of the windows. Even Timo Werner, which we'll come on to talk about shortly as well. That deal was done and completed yesterday for another season on loan. But overall, what have you made of Ange's work so far at Spurs? Because he's had a lot of criticism from a lot of fans, a lot of Spurs fans, a lot of pundits. As you mentioned there, the way that we ended the season, a lot of criticism went Ange's way. But what have you made of the work he's done?
I would give him a solid 8 out of 10 for his first season, to be honest. I think that he's acknowledged that there are issues there. He knows it's not perfect. And I think seeing that bit of emotion from him that we hadn't seen all season towards the back end when things weren't going well shows how much he cares. And I think that, I've been very critical of him this season because, it's very hard to detach yourself from the emotion of football and the fact that, we start the season so well, the expectation goes up. It's hard to then bring yourself back down to earth because you're just enjoying the moment. And Ange is saying at the start of the season, fans should just enjoy it, and then it comes crashing down. It becomes difficult and times are testing and the football's perhaps not what we'd expected to see. And it's not quite as attractive as it was at the start of the season. And it becomes a little bit of a grind and a little bit difficult, but we still kind of finish the season, in a bit of a limp, but what is a good season? I think what it is he's very different to anything that I've ever seen at Spurs. There has to be something, people will always use the term naive and Ange Postecoglou. What I found interesting was I did quite a bit of research on, looking back at interviews that he's done in the past at Celtic and when he was in Japan and even in the Australia job. And everything that we worry about as fans are the same things that fans have worried about the whole time throughout Ange's career. And every season he's in management, he gets asked the same things. And then certain problems that, people are worried about, he sorts out, and then they end up winning everywhere he goes. So I'm trying to think about it with that sort of glass half full perspective of, okay, yes, we need to improve the set pieces. Yes, there are lots of aspects of our game that we can improve. There are things that I worry about. I worry that we're too, reliant on Mickey van der Ven to sweep up at the back. But then, Radu comes in towards the back end of the season, shows another way for us of playing. Ange is criticised for lack of plan B. I think I've definitely mentioned that in the heat of the moment before. And then you actually realise how many games have been affected by Ange making subs. Subs that have impacted games. And then you start to think of, okay, well, these same questions get asked and everywhere he's been, he deals with them. Let's give him a chance. And I think my perspective on it is now, ultimately, one, there's something to be massively admired about someone that has a vision of how football should be. And he's so hell-bent on that he's decided that if you don't want to win and you don't want to join him on this journey to win, you're not his kind of person. And I think actually that's what's come out of the whole kind of wanting, where fans wanted Arsenal to win or not, or, wanted Spurs to beat City so Arsenal win the title or not win the title, or even though ultimately it has no bearing. We have no bearing on what Arsenal do in those other games, which is far more important. And I think that's the point he made. But then on top of that, it's still early days. And I feel like I need to before I can have a real opinion of him, I need to give him all of next season and hope that, you know, this club backs him and the chairman backs him and he gets the players he wants. And, you know, I think we can have a really exciting season next season. But yeah, I think if you come back to me next year, I will have a far better view, probably more concise, you know, more sort of black and white view on Postecoglou, which I simply don't have now, because I think it is just such an interesting time, and you know, it's something we're not used to.
Yeah, I completely agree, Josh, and I think we're all, you know, feel a little bit easier with the situation. You know, at the end of next season to see what we've witnessed and see how he is backed. When you mentioned there about the board have got to back him, what is the definition of backing Ange Postecoglou this season? Because I feel, as a Spurs fan, as I touched upon there, you know, the 2 transfer windows so far, he's got business done early. The last summer transfer window was a decent one. That was a pretty decent window that we had. Are you expecting more of the same in the summer?
I think it was a decent window in our definition of decent being Spurs fans. And I think that part of this is actually a culture that Ange is trying to change at the football club. Because I don't think if we were, I don't know, say Chelsea fans or City fans or Liverpool fans or Arsenal fans, I don't think we'd consider that as a decent window. I think it would be an okay window. But ultimately, we sold the best striker in the world and we didn't replace him. We went half a season without much defensive cover, having, you know, sold Sanchez after the transfer window had closed in the UK. And the Kane deal was done so late. And Ange has even spoken about it. He knew the deal was done. He knew he was going when he arrived. He knew before he even joined the club that he was going to be sold that summer, almost certainly. So I think now, moving forward, because obviously that's the past, I think it's weird because I don't think as fans, everyone as a fan, I think we all do it. I do it. Everyone does it, I feel like, has this element of, what would you do if you were playing it, if it was like FIFA or Football Manager? You know, who would you go and buy? What positions do you think we need to strengthen? But actually, if we're really going to go all in with Ange, we kind of have to trust what he wants to do. And if there's a player that he wants, whether we rate them or not, or whether we think, you know, one example, Santi Jimenez, I don't personally rate him that much. I think he's a good potential player, but I don't think he's right for Spurs. And a lot of fans would be talking about Vincent Janssen and comparisons of, oh, well, it's not quite worked out before. And I'm not, you know, I'd rather a proven player that comes in that's going to cost a lot of money. You know, we already know that Spurs aren't going to operate in the way that, you know, an Arsenal or a City might, where they may spend £100 million on a player. Until that happens, I don't think anyone can believe it to happen at Spurs. And Ange just kind of said that's not how we really operate. But within the confines of how this club wants to operate, which pains me to do it because I don't like the ownership of this club, but you never see Spurs involved in chats about financial fair play and those issues. So we're staying the right side of the line. And within those confines, I suppose it has to be players he wants. And whether we feel comfortable with them coming in or not, if we're really going to back Ange, we've got to give him what he wants and hope that is going to bring about change. And, you know, I can see Darren said we need top quality players bought in. Levy needs to change the wage structure, give Ange the opportunity to get real quality in 5 or 6 top players to show ambitions for once to the fans. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But ultimately, it has to be 5 or 6 players, if we do bring that many players in, which I think we might, that Ange wants. And if Ange says, okay, I want a quality player and he's going to cost a lot of money, I want, say, it's going to cost £85 million to bring in Kvicha Kvaratskhelia from Napoli, just say. I, being Ange Postecoglou in this situation, see him as the perfect Son replacement long term. This is going to be someone that we can bring in and can be our left winger for the next 10 years. You know, if that's the mindset, we have to give him that, because ultimately Spurs are not a club of winners. We're not a winning club anymore. I've seen Spurs win one major trophy in my lifetime. That's it. And Spurs have been, in the past a cup team, and Spurs have been a team with a lot of pride. But, right now, the people inside the club, haven't been winners, and Ange Postecoglou is. And that's, I think, the key thing here is he's here because he wants to win. So we need to listen to the person that is a winner. And I think that's, again, I bring back that City game and the mindset of all of that. And I think that's probably where he was coming from, why he couldn't fathom fans that didn't want Spurs to win, because, I guess it's because for him, all he cares about is winning and doing the very best with his team.
Josh, is it fair to say that we are, as fans, now witnessing a huge change at the football club? Because when you look at the transfer windows, we have got business done early. Whatever Ange seems to want, Ange seems to get, since he's been at the football club. Because, we often talk about players that have come in the door. It's obvious, very, very obvious from day one, Ange Postecoglou didn't want the likes of Tanguy Ndombele at the football club. He didn't want Eric Dyer. He didn't want Davinson Sanchez. He's offloaded those players. A number of players are still to come back that we'll talk about later on in the show. But, players like Tanguy Ndombele, of course, he'll be coming back in the summer. And that's another situation that Spurs will need to sort out. But, are we witnessing major change at the football club, in your opinion? Because it does seem whatever Ange wants, he's getting. He wants Timo Werner to stay. He's got Timo Werner to stay, £165,000 a week.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is certainly a culture shift going on at the club, but I think that the difficulty as a fan is it's very hard, and I'm certainly guilty of that. It's very hard to be patient with it. When you see it, you just kind of want it all to happen at once, and you just want us to be that team at the top of the table now.
Isn't that, Josh, isn't that unfair though on someone like Ange? Because I know, a lot of us, I think James Maddison said it on Sky Sports with Michael Bridge yesterday that, the fans need to be patient. I think what he meant is be patient with this manager, because all of us think, well, we haven't won a trophy in 16 years. How patient do you want us to be? But then when a new manager comes in, surely you've got to give them the time, because, it's fair to say, a lot of us have said it, both you and I have said it hundreds of times on this channel that, the recruitment in recent years has not been good enough. But the recruitment since Ange has come in, if you were to draw a clean slate under it and say, well, since Ange has been here, there, things are changing.
No, absolutely. It's been good. And I think you make a really, really important point there, in that when I say, we need to be patient with it, we've brought in a manager that wins everywhere. We're expecting, second season at Celtic or whatever, I think they finished over 10 points higher, way more goals, way fewer conceded. And, I think what I mean by that is I do think Ange can win at this football club. I really do. But if next season we finish fourth or even fifth again, but on a higher points tally, would fans want him out? Would we give him the patience still? Because I think this is the thing, is I think I'm looking at this now and I'm looking at the table in front of me, and I see Villa's very, very achievable. We can finish above them. We can get ourselves into fourth, no problem at all. Possibly even third, because we don't know what Liverpool's going to be like under Arne Slot. There's an element of, who knows? But that bridge to Arsenal and City is massive. And I suppose it depends what fans' expectations are. Are we expecting to be automatically challenging the likes of City and Arsenal next season if we have another good window? It's such a huge bridge to gap that, for me, I think that it's going to take maybe a little bit longer than that. Next season, we may be surprised. We may have a season unlike any other, but it may take another year on top. I don't know. But this is the difficulty. When we need to be patient, we just need to trust the process and hope that we just carry on improving the areas that we need to improve on. We improve on the players that Ange wants he gets. We get that striker. It's evident that Ange wants a striker. It's evident he wants a winger. So we give him those players, and I guess just trust the process, which feels really weird because we've been going through managers, like nobody's business in the last 5-6 years. So the whole thing is just kind of a bit foreign. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Really, is we need to back him with the players he wants, and for me, progress would be we score more goals, we concede less, we finish on a higher points tally and in a higher league position, perhaps. But ultimately, I think ask any fan, would you rather take us getting the same amount of points in the Premier League and finishing 5th again, but win the Europa League, or finish 10 points higher and finish 4th and not win something, or even finish 15 points higher and 3rd and win nothing? I think you'd take the trophy all day long. Whatever form glory comes to this club, Ange is a winner, and that's what is the most important thing. That's what he will be judged on.
Josh, what are your expectations? Because, if I was to ask you, if Spurs finish 4th in the Premier League next season, we play Champions League the following season. We have a good run in the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the Europa League, but we don't lift any one of those trophies. But Spurs finish 4th. Is that progression for you?
Technically, yes, it is technically. But I think that what we care about more than anything, it's that how Spurs once again don't win a trophy. It's banter. I think this is what becomes more than just having a balanced view on what is progression, because I think what matters to me is when I go into my workplace or when I see my friends and Chelsea have finished 6th, but Chelsea have won an FA Cup. They get to boast and take the mick about this, and Spurs winning nothing again. And they get that moment of joy. Winning a cup is far better than finishing in the top 4 in terms of, I remember the League Cup, and you remember these moments, and those are the things that stick with you for a lifetime. I remember every second nearly of Madrid in the Champions League final. And I think even if we never get to a Champions League final again, I will always remember that weekend. But I won't remember finishing 4th, and that's the thing. I think for us, we've gone such a long time now without a trophy, and we are one of the big 6 in quote unquote. And yet we're the ones that have won the fewest trophies. And we're the only ones to have not won a trophy in the last, 15 years of those clubs. So for me, progress can be seen one of 2 ways. Yes, that's league progress, but progress for me would be Ange is trying to change this club into a club with a winning mentality. He's trying to turn that get rid of that soft underbelly and turn this club into a club full of winners. If we can go and win the League Cup, even if we don't win the Europa League and we don't win the FA Cup, if we won the League Cup but went out the FA Cup and the League Cup, and the Europa League early, that's still better than nothing, and that's still a good season because it's winning a cup. It's a memory that will last with you, for a lifetime. Think about, I guess like the granddads going with their grandkids or whatever. I met your son the other day at the under-21 game. Think about that moment of you and your son seeing Spurs win a trophy. Compare that to finishing 4th. What's the better feeling?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. That's, for me, is progress. And I think Ange Postecoglou probably thinks the same because he's a winner. Everywhere he's gone, he's won trophies. And I think that if you were to give him a choice of 4th, and I would love to ask him that question. If I got to meet him, that's the question I would ask him 100%. 4th, but no trophy, or 6th and win a trophy. I think he'd finish 6th and win a trophy.
Well, I was going to ask that, Josh. What do you think that Ange's priority will be for next year? Because of course we know that Champions League brings so much more money, 3 times the money that you would get as a football club than finishing in the Europa League. I think Ange Postecoglou knows and understands all of our frustration, all of the fans' frustration in not winning silverware for so long. Will he approach the domestic cups, FA Cup and League Cup, differently, do you think, to last season? And how seriously do you think that he will take the Europa League? Because I've said this, year in, year out. I'm a great fan of, cup competitions. I'd love Spurs to go all out to try and win these competitions. And, with the Europa League, when you even go back to the Pochettino days, it was like Poch was always worried about the Sunday game. So we'd go into the Thursday game in the Europa League, and he'd always be worried about that game on the Sunday in the Premier League. So, I get that, a lot of the under 21, certainly with the very successful year that we'll speak about shortly, that they've had, players getting opportunities. But, should these players get opportunities at the end of games when the job is, done, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that's something I would like to see more of. There's been times where I've been like thinking, why are we not giving Mikey Moore some minutes? Why aren't we giving Jamie Donnelly some minutes when he's on the bench?
Yeah.
We won the game.
Yeah.
The game's done. We can control the game. Let's give this player some minutes. And, even Lo Celso, I'm like, why is he coming on in the 86th minute? When he could be coming on in the 60th minute and making a real impact in the game. And rather than us, holding on to what we've got, we could go and get another, But I think Ange will take it seriously, and I think he'll take it seriously for a couple of reasons. One, I think he really, did learn his lesson from the Fulham game. I don't think we can say we went under strength against City. We had a lot of injuries when we played City, and even our best team may not have beaten City. And let's face it, even though City were the better team that day, it was a pretty contentious goal. That was the first time we'd seen this new rule where apparently you're allowed to kind of shove the goalkeeper into the back of the net, and you're allowed to be a lot more physical with him. Because before, the goalkeepers, they had that kind of protection from referees, not in this game and not thereafter on Vicario. So I don't really blame him for us going out of the FA Cup when we got the worst possible draw, you'd think, on paper in that first round. Fulham, different matter. We rested a lot of players and we lose on penalties. If we'd won the game on penalties, who knows what would have happened. But Europa League's different. What is Tottenham's greatest success in Europe? Okay, there's the Cup Winners' Cup, and then it's the equivalent of winning the Europa League twice. So some of Tottenham's greatest successes have been in what is now the Europa League. With this no drop downs from the Champions League, you look at the teams that are in there, such a great opportunity. It's a fantastic opportunity. And, it's one of those that if we don't get through for whatever reason, I can't see that because it's a league system. And I'm sure Spurs will be one of those top 8 teams, almost certainly.
Yeah.
Then we don't have to worry about the Conference League. We are just out, and that's fine. But this is about building a bigger squad. And I know you mentioned Timo Werner. This is exactly why I think Timo Werner has been brought into the club. Because I think, and Fabrizio Romano's reported that he still wants a winger and a striker. This is about squad depth. Now, we need a bigger squad. We can't be looking to our bench and thinking, my God, look at the bench that Arsenal has. Look at the bench that Newcastle has. Why have we got a bench that, just doesn't look up to standards? So that's what this is about. And I think ultimately a bigger squad backing Ange, we can compete on all those fronts. But Ange is a winner, as I say. And you alluded to it. Ange gets that frustration. Now, Ange, I think the thing that I get from him is that fundamentally, you get with a lot of managers, they come across like they do kind of, they are managers, almost like career managers. I don't know if that is the right way of putting it, like career politicians, but they kind of look like they're in the job. That if things, it hits the fan, they'll jump ship if a club gets relegated, go to another club, that type of thing. Whereas with Ange, the way he comes across as a football fan, first and foremost. There's this kind of refreshing honesty that he's got. And I guess that, I don't know, I feel it when I listen to him. I feel that he talks about it as if he is a fan himself. And all he wants to see is the team win. And I think that's why he gets quite sharp with certain people having certain views and why he gets quite snappy with reporters sometimes, because he just cares and he doesn't take the soap opera around it. He just wants to win. It's that simple. So yeah, I think he will take it seriously for sure.
Josh, you mentioned there about the squad depth and about building the squad to try and compete on all fronts. Now, what expectation that the fans will have and what he will prioritise for next year. How confident are you that he will build a good enough squad to compete on all fronts for next season. You know, in 3 cup competitions plus the Premier League, of course, as well. You know, of course, the board and the and all of the fans will want that top 4 finish again, certainly. But there is still a lot of work to do, and I must underline this, that you know, we are still going through a major rebuild, and I think that some fans sometimes forget how many players need to go out the door and how many new players need to come in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. It is going to take time, and this is why, again, we've got to be patient. But at the same time, that's a question for Mr. Levy. That's not a question for Ange Postecoglou. Daniel Levy is the one that can give him the budget, and this is one of the things that annoys me about this top 4 debate. Right, is the talk of the money, because Spurs is consistently a top 10 most profitable sports team in the world. Tottenham is consistently one of the top, top 10 to 15 richest clubs in the world. The revenue streams are massive. All the off-field stuff brings in crazy revenue. We've got the best facilities in the world, arguably. And the financial reports all show the same thing, that as far as football clubs go, we are pretty healthy. And we are in a very good position. You look at the FFP reports. Spurs are consistently one of the clubs that could spend the most money based on FFP, because we've been following the rules consistently. Therefore, Spurs could go and spend a good few hundred million and still be fine with FFP. Rules could be changing again, as they seem to all the time. And I believe there is some rule changes coming into action that are going to kind of benefit the richer clubs. And you know, at some point, we've all been waiting for that point. I'm not saying that managers haven't been backed and we haven't spent money, because we have. But they're spending money just for the sake of it. You know, we've spent money a bit like Chelsea have, just throwing money at random players, hoping it'll all work. But now that there does seem to be a clear strategy, the transfer plan, I mean, we can't fault a lot of the recruitment over the last 2-3 years. That quality of recruitment, but with actually a much bigger budget and the ability to go for more ambitious targets, ones that might cost a bit of money. Let's just say Nico Williams, right? £43 million release clause. Zubimendi, I think he's got a £50 million release clause there or thereabouts. Eze, who has a release clause just north of £50 million. Elise, who again I think has a release clause, or if not a release clause, is available for just under 60 million. You know, there are players that you can go and get. And, you know, for me, I'd like to see Ange get those players. And I think what would be different to what Spurs have done in the past, and I'm going to use the silver lining here with Bergvall. And Bergvall, who was wanted by, Barcelona, and it looked like he was going to Barcelona. He was even in Barcelona, and then comes to Spurs. We need to be doing more of that. We need to be, if there is a player, say Eze, say he's available for, I don't know, just over £50 million, say £52 million, whatever it is. And there's about 6 or 7 clubs. We go in as well and we prove to that player that we want them more than those other clubs. And Ange sells that vision, because I think if it comes down to just the player talking to Ange, I think Ange wins that battle every time. That's what I want to see from Spurs this window, actually going out and getting players that are wanted by other clubs, and not just signing players that no one else is interested in, but Spurs will take them. We don't want those second-rate players. We want, players that are going to really make a difference. And as I say, it's a question for Levy, because until I see it, and I know that I'm trying to be balanced, I know the signings have been good, but until I see us have a really outstanding window and I see Levy do something different, I'm always going to be sceptical.
With James Maddison coming in last summer, Josh, I think everyone was extremely happy with that signing. Of course, he got injured after those 10 games, and then, of course, it took him a while to rediscover that form earlier on. But what are the chances of Spurs signing someone like Eze this summer?
Well, it really depends if Ange wants him, because I think there was probably the possibility of doing a deal like that last summer.
It's strange, Josh, because there have been a couple of games recently at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium where Eze's entire family have been in a box. Do you read anything into that?
Well, that's down to the fact that his agent, he shares an agent with Richarlison, for starters, at CAA base. And CAA base, who represent Ange, and they represent a lot of our players, they have a box, and that's a thing, and when they're playing, and they're, it's quite a big box from what I've been told, and they can invite families of players. I'm trying not to say something and get myself in trouble, but wink, wink, there is probably the scope for Spurs to do something there. And as I say, I mentioned the agent situation. If Spurs want to do the deal, I'm sure there is a deal to be done. Spurs will not be the only club that went in for Eze if they did. And ultimately, I think the decision comes down to Ange Postecoglou. And again, that was the same thing with Maddison. Maddison was a CAA-based deal, and it was very easy to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if that deal was agreed far in advance of the window coming in, a bit like Yves Bissouma. I think Bissouma was agreed January before. It wouldn't surprise me if that deal was done way in advance. But with a player like Eze, of course you can do the deal, but the decision would be down to Ange. If Ange says he wants him, I'm sure Eze could take that opportunity and come to Spurs, and he would play a lot of games, and you could maybe push Maddison out to the left. That might be a solution, and put Eze in the middle, whatever you want to do. I'm not the tactician here, but that's going to come down to Ange. If Ange doesn't want him or isn't convinced by him for whatever reason, my mind would be blown if he wasn't, because Eze such a phenomenal footballer. Then the deal won't be done. But as I say, I'm sure, without wanting to get myself in trouble or anything, I think that all the stars are aligned to do a deal like that. Everything is possible for Spurs to position themselves to get a deal like that done. Whether that happens is down to Ange, it's down to the club, it's down to the player. But I hope so. I hope so. I think Eze is amazing. He'd be one of the first players I'd get through the door if I could.
I love players with Premier League experience, Josh, because of course they know exactly what they're walking into. Like James Maddison, who I would say he was a statement signing last summer. What are the chances of statement signings this summer? Because of course, when you look at, we haven't even mentioned Mickey van der Ven yet. When you look at someone like him, played 30 odd games for Wolfsburg, walks into the Premier League, the way he has adapted in the Premier League and life at Spurs, simply incredible. No wonder why he got all of the Player of the Year awards. But it's great signing players like that. But what are the chances of Spurs bringing in experienced Premier League players in the summer?
I think high. There's a home quota situation that we need to address. Japhet Tanganga's gone to Millwall. And you look at Dyer going as well. Kane went. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Skip may stay, but I wouldn't again be surprised if he was one that was, forced to make way for someone better. I mean, look at the players we've been linked with. Gallagher, we've been linked with Morgan Gibbs-White. Eze is another one that we have been linked with. There are several players that there's a reason why we're being linked to homegrown players, and I think everyone's aware that we do need to address that some way. And what better way to address that than to get one of the most exciting players on the ball in the league, a London boy, someone that was rejected by Arsenal as a youngster as well. So that added bit of spice. Who was the last one that we had that was rejected by Arsenal? I think it was Harry Kane, wasn't it? So yeah, I think it's very, very high that we're going to get some homegrown players, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine by me. I like that. And again, I think statement signings, I think we could make one or two. I don't think statement signings are going to be Declan Rice 105 million or whatever it was, but they're going to be statement signings in that they're going to be players that come in and make a real impact next season. I think Mickey van der Ven is a statement signing, whether people thought it at the time or not. He has been just insane. And Maddison as well is a statement signing. So I think it might be similar kind of fees. It might be slightly up on that. I don't know. But yeah, I think I'd expect the striker to be a statement signing, and I'd expect to probably make one other statement signing, and then probably it's going to be more of the same, buying players that could do a job, and slightly younger players that can develop into top players as well. I think that seems to be the Spurs way. But yeah, homegrown, I think that's a real strong possibility. I would probably expect, if we're going to say we make 5 or 6 signings, well, yeah, 5 or 6 signings, I would expect 2 or 3 of them at least to be homegrown.
Josh, if you could, for me, go through the positions where you think that Ange Postecoglou wants to improve. What do you think is on Postecoglou's shopping list, for the team to go out and get these deals done? What's on the shopping list for you?
Striker, a winger that plays off the left but can also do a job on the right. He seems to like these players that can kind of play on both. He will want, I think, a more of a box-to-box midfielder, I think. Someone that's going to get us a few more goals from midfield. Not saying that Maddison doesn't, but I think Maddison's been used in slightly different ways. I think he will probably want another centre-back as well for cover, because I'm not sure whether Ash Phillips is going to get his chance in the first team next season. I don't know if we may loan him out again. I'm not sure, so a centre-back might be on there. I think that's going to be the main bulk, and I think if he can get a 6, he'll get a 6, or a defensive midfield, or whatever you want to call it. I think that would be probably what he wants. I think he, on top of that, does need full-back cover for Porro and for Udogie, and I think that's probably going to be one of the areas too, because it looks, by all the noises, it looks like Emerson Royale will leave the club this summer. Italian giant swirling. So that means we need to get in a right back. Left back, we may be okay. I'm not sure Ben Davies is I'm not sure how much he can give for us anymore. I think he's been an amazing servant to the club, but I'm not sure what he can give now in terms of this system. So maybe Mickey van der Ven is the option at left back and Dragusin comes in or whatever. But I think at least 1, if not 2 fullbacks, because I think this is the thing. Our fullback system is quite unique. And if we're going to carry on with this kind of crazy inverted high fullback, and I do think it's absolutely bonkers. I'm still not on side with that yet. I think it's mad. We're going to need very athletic young players that can come in and do that job as well. So yeah, probably about 6 or 7 things that we need, really. Whether Ange gets them all, who knows? Who knows?
Like I said, Josh, that is a lot to do, isn't it? It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised as well, by the way, if Ange prioritizes X, Y, and Z. So he says, okay, I want a striker, I want a winger, and I want a box-to-box midfielder, and say, okay, I'm going to take, we lose Emerson, so I'm going to get a fullback. So how many players is that? Striker, winger, box-to-box, fullback. That's 4 players on top of Werner that's coming on loan. If there's an opportunity, okay, he wants a centre-back. Okay, that's 6 players that he's brought in. And let's add Bergvall as the 7th. I know the deal was done earlier, but he's coming in like a new signing in the summer. So that's 7, okay? And then we've still got that number 6 position that needs dealing with, possibly a backup at left back. Okay, we'll deal with those in January, like we did with Dragusin, for example, and Werner coming in. And I think that's the other thing, is we may not get it all in the summer, but as long as there's a plan and we prioritize the most important positions first, which is a striker, a winger, a fullback, and for me, probably a box-to-box midfielder, we can probably afford to wait until January, because we may not get the deal we want for certain individuals. It may be the case that, Ash Phillips has to stay in at centre-back for the first 6 months, and in January, we'll bring someone in and loan him out. Who knows? But that is what I want to see. I just want to see us prioritise those bits, get them in early. I'm sure Ange will want that. And then if we need to add again in January, we can.
Josh, when you come on this channel, of course, Spurs channel, how much of this do you talk as a Spurs fan and how much as a journalist?
100% Spurs fan, pretty much. obviously I hear certain bits and pieces. You know, there's little people that I know, and I'll speak to certain people about certain transfery bits. And when it comes to crunch time in the transfer window, I'm very on it, especially deadline day. You know, I will follow it rigorously, and I will speak to as many people as I can. I'll speak to other journalists. I'll speak to various people. But when I come on here, I don't do any of this to boost a career or anything. I just do it because I love talking about Spurs. And it's one of the only places I can actually do it.
Well, it's great to have you here, Josh. And as I say, we could talk about about this for hours. I wanted to talk to you about players possibly going out the door, because we talk about all that work, all of those players to come in. Now, a lot of players still need to head out the door. Bryan Gil is expected to leave. Now, there's reports in Spain stating that Sevilla want to sign Bryan Gil, but they want an obligation to buy, but they only want to pay around €6 million. Leeds United apparently want Joe Rodon, but Spurs want £15 million. It's not expected that Leeds want to spend that amount of money. BBC Sport have just stated that Genoa want to sign Jed Spence on a permanent deal, but they don't want to pay the £8.5 million option, which was included in the initial loan deal. There are so many of these situations. Of course, we've got Tanguy Ndombele coming back. You mentioned Jabat Tanganga possibly going to Millwall on a permanent. There are so many of these situations. Richarlison's even come out and said that he wants to stay. It's fake news that he wants to leave the football club. He wants to stay for next year. Emerson Royale, who you mentioned. There are so many deals that are in the pipeline, and there are so many situations where Spurs are probably in a bit of a problem situation, in the fact that they want to offload some of these players and they want decent money for them, but clubs don't want to pay the money. What do you think is going to happen? And what players do you want to see head out the door?
Yeah, I mean, for me, just getting my list up of players. I think that we're going to have to cut our losses. I think we're going to have to release Tanguy Ndombele. We're going to have to pay him off. We'll do whatever we need to do to get him out of his contract, and hope that he agrees to some sort of compensation. I think it becomes more harmful in the long term to just keep him there on those wages and have to deal and waste all that time trying to get him a club. Beyond that, I think Rodon can command a fee. He's done well. But whether Leeds, I think Leeds will want him, of course, but I don't think they've got a chance now. I'd be shocked if Leeds went out and got him because of missing out on promotion. I think he would have gone if they got in the Premier League. But to be honest, there will be probably Premier League clubs that are looking at him that have seen enough quality there. Emerson Royale will command a decent fee. Hill is one of those that he's not had the minutes, so therefore I don't think we can really expect much. They love him in Spain, and I think this is just a case of, again, he didn't cost an awful lot in terms of, well, it was a swap deal, wasn't it? There was Lamela and a bit of money.
And now, Josh, Lamela is available.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I love Lamela. I'm taking him back on a free all day long. If you honestly, if you give me $6 million for Bryan Gil and I take Eric Lamela for one more season, yeah, a lot of people disagree with that. But there's some players that just get what it means to wear the shirt and just have that bit of, I can't. I'm not going to do the Diego Simeone kind of, the infamous cojones kind of gesture, but you get what I mean. There's someone that's just got that bit of something.
Yeah.
And even if he was only fit for 10 games in a season, he would give absolutely everything in those 10 games. No, I'm joking. I don't think the time is now to get Lamela back, but I just love him. But this is the thing though. It's like, at the end of the day, Spurs have plenty of money. The TV money's getting bigger and bigger. Let's not act like Spurs don't have money and that we need to sell loads of players to be able to do anything in the window. It's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. And this is something that, has been fed into us as a fan base by years of underachieving in the transfer window, years of settling for less under this ownership. So, yes, it's going to be difficult getting players out, but I do believe that Ange has shown a ruthlessness I mean, even looking at what Sanchez went to Turkey for what we bought him for. We signed him for 42.5 million. He went for what? Just over 9 million pounds, something like that.
Yeah, but we've mentioned that recruitment, has been poor in recent years, and of course Spurs have to cut their losses on some of these players. That's exactly how it's going to be. Tanguy Ndombele, record signing, as you said, they will probably end up letting him go.
Yeah, and this is it. You've got to get ruthless now, and I think that's the mindset that Ange has already shown. Ange was like, "Nah, I don't want him, mate," and it's kind of like, I guess that's how it's got to be, because we're never going to get that 60 million back from Ndombele. We'd be lucky to get 5 million for Ndombele, and we can be thankful that Ndombele's won the league with Galatasaray. So maybe there's a little bit of tax to go on that, but I'm not even sure I don't know if Galatasaray would take him back.
I don't think so.
Certainly not on those wages.
No. I saw a stat the other day, Josh. I think he played about 31 minutes of football in the last couple of months. And, I've seen reports out, you probably know better than me, but I've seen lots of reports out stating that Spurs even offered, Tanguy Ndombele to Galatasaray for around 5 million euros, and they've even said no. So that's going to be a very, very interesting situation. But I find it a sad story. A player with so much potential, a player that everyone wanted Tottenham Hotspur to sign in 2019. Spurs went out, paid big money for him, and it just simply has not worked out at all. Josh, I'm going to throw some names at you. Sergio Reguilon, what do you think will happen with him?
I think he will go, but I've actually been pretty impressed with him at Brentford, minus that moment that you had at Burnley. I don't know. I know he's not done it for Spurs. I know people might not like it, but I don't know. I feel like in this system, he could be a better left-back alternative to Ben Davis, personally, for this system. And if he has no interest in being part of that project, then he should be someone that we can get a bit of money from. Brentford, I'm sure, would take him because he's been good for them. And maybe that works out. But I don't know. I like him in the system. I like him as a backup option. He could save you a signing.
It's a weird one, this, because Reguilon actually come out and said that he spoke to Ange Postecoglou. Postecoglou seemed happy with him. And then all of a sudden, the next day, he wanted him gone. It just seems quite a weird situation how 1 minute Ange just said to him, yeah, it's fine. You're going to be here. And then the next minute, he's not playing any minutes and he's turfing him out. You mentioned Oliver Skipp earlier, that he'll probably stay. When he's got that much competition in front of him, and bearing in mind that Spurs want to strengthen in midfield, is it a good situation for Oliver Skipp to be in, just waiting around 4 minutes? Because I've often said this. It was all right back in the day when Spurs and other teams played, reserve team fixtures. That doesn't happen anymore. It's the under-21s, as you well know. And, the players that are over 21 or don't get included in these under-21 squads, they very, very rarely play and get game time.
Yeah, it's difficult with Ollie Skipp because I absolutely love the fact that he's Spurs. He bleeds the club. He is the embodiment of Spurs. He's the only one of the kind of senior first team players that is that now that Kane's gone. And it's difficult. I think Højbjerg's leaving, so that's one player gone. So I would probably see it as Højbjerg's replacement rather than Ollie Skipp. But I think what's best for Ollie Skipp, he will know what's best for him. But yeah, I don't want to see him on the bench anymore. But I know there's an element that I just don't think he's good enough for where we want to be. And that it pains me to say it, but I would love to see him go to another Premier League club and really get the career he deserves and really go out and have the same impact that he had when he went to Norwich City, for example, and maybe, maybe get himself into a position where he can try and challenge and I'm sure he wants to play for England one day, as he was part of the under-21s that won the European Championships. I'm sure he wants to be in the England senior team and have that chance. He's never going to have that at Spurs. It's just not happening. So it's one of those where it's kind of like you don't want him, but you don't want anyone else to have him kind of situation. It's kind of, yeah, it's a difficult one. I either way, I try and look at it priority wise as Højbjerg's replacement and not the Skip replacement just yet.
Josh, I think a lot of Spurs fans do it. Are you one of them as well that get very sentimental about players leaving sometimes?
You can't not be. I don't get people that aren't, because everyone has a particular moment of a player. And, you know, I was gutted when Defoe left. When Vertonghen left, and that was probably one of the most upset I've been over a player was losing Vertonghen, because he meant so much to me, and same thing with Danny Rose. When the whole Danny Rose thing happened, I was really sad seeing it all end like that, because he'd been, so brilliant for us and came through as a youngster. We bought him so young. I think it's almost easier when a player goes for big money. I feel like I was really upset when Kane left. I was working that day, and I was working on the coverage of that when it happened. And I remember my eyes, it was like I was chopping onions. My eyes were going when I saw the photos of him at the airport, because I suppose at my age of 24, that's been my whole, from being a kid into becoming a man. That's been the guy that's been there doing it for us. But it is almost easier seeing a player go for big money to a big club where you're like, okay, I get why they're doing this. Whereas there are some players that they could be rubbish, right? They could be really poor, but you just like them for some weird reason. Like Lucas Moura, that was another one that was like, I will never forget Amsterdam. I will never forget that. And even though he, a lot of fans didn't like him by the end of the time he was there, or didn't think he was good enough. I don't know. It's one of them. If the player's rubbish from the get-go and they have a stinky attitude, if it's like and I'm not saying that these players have bad attitudes, but if it's a GK and Kudu or a Clinton and G, wherever it was, like you kind of forget about it. But players that gave a little bit, like Lamela, like Moura, there is that bit. Nico Kranjčar was another one that I was weirdly really upset about. Sandro again, and we all see what Sandro's like now, him quite well. Sandro is someone that so when they leave the club, if they leave because of their age and all these things, it happens. But you're only human at the end of the day. But yeah, I think Skip probably does need to leave. I just don't see Spurs doing everything in one go. I still think it might take a bit longer than that.
Josh, you mentioned Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. I think it's fully expected that he will leave the club this summer. But you mentioned Danny Rose. I'm just going to go off topic for a second here. Danny Rose was talking to the Spurs show a couple of days ago, and he mentioned Mauricio Pochettino, stating that he likes the work that Ange Postecoglou is doing at the moment, but the way he has inherited this squad. And he said about Pochettino, had he have been given the tools, you never know, he could have still been the manager now. He would like to see Pochettino back at Spurs one day. Does it change your opinion on Pochettino at all, the fact that he has left Chelsea in the way that he has?
I knew you were going to ask me this at some point. What did I text you? I texted you, I think the day it happened, I said, there's a part of me that still loves him, and I don't know why. I felt so angry about everything that happened, but the second he left Chelsea, I kind of just forgot about it. Maybe I'm being fickle, and that's just being a football fan, I guess. But my instant reaction was like, he needs to come home at some point. Not now, but at some point, I want to see him come home, and that Spurs and there's always this element of unfinished business. I think we all felt that there was unfinished business, and he was let down by Levy. He really was. And the other thing is, let's not forget, Chelsea offered him a contract. Tottenham didn't. If Tottenham had offered him a contract, I'm sure he would have come to us over Chelsea, almost certainly. In fact, the start of that summer, I was looking, because it's obviously what I do for a living. I was looking at Jesus Perez and Miguel D'Agostino's Instagram stories, and they were there watching, I think, Y Scout and watching tactical clips. And they were all wearing Tottenham tracksuits. This was the same summer that he joins Chelsea. says everything you need to know. I don't want to get into the whole, okay, we're living in the past, we need to move on. I get that. I do get that. But if the opportunity presents itself in the future and the stars align, then I wouldn't be angry at him coming back at all. And I would, if for whatever reason something did happen and he did come back to the club, obviously I don't make those decisions. Would I welcome him back with open arms? Absolutely.
Yeah.
whether people like it or not, that's my emotional reaction to it.
Josh, next up, Radu Dragushin. What do you make of the amount of game time that he's had since joining the football club? What do you make of the agent with him keep speaking out about when Spurs were struggling, conceding goal after goal in those last 10 games or so of the season? He was putting forward a case, kept saying that the team are conceding goals, he needs to be in the team. Surely he's going to get a lot more game time next season with us being in the Europa League as well.
Yes, he's going to play more. Of course, he's going to play more. I thought he was excellent towards the back end of the season. He really showed why we brought him in. I think he's just got a lippy agent. That's it. He's an agent that his style of doing things is, I'm going to say X, Y, and Z to try and force the club into doing things. It's going to work with some people. It's not going to work with others. I think people are I'm sure people are going to roll their eyes at that agent, inside the club thinking, not him again. He's not the only player in the world to have an agent that talks too much and that, in the media and does those things. But ultimately, I think let the football do the talking. When he's played, he's been magnificent. He's got a big role to play at this club. Let's not forget, he joined in January into a new league, into a new system. He'd always played back three. He's moving into a back four with new teammates. Next season, let's judge him. And I'm sure he will get a lot more game time. And, there's an argument to say that, and I'm not the tactician, but I look at this squad and I think this squad's built to play three at the back. And it's not, I'm not Ange Postecoglou. Ange will do what he wants, but I just look at three at the back with Dragushin, Van der Ven on the left, Romero on the right, or whichever way you want to do it. When you look at what our fullbacks are like with Udogie and Porre, they look built to play wing backs. I mean, that's what the system looks built for.
Yeah.
Whether we do that is another thing, but either way, I'm sure he'll get minutes.
Josh, next up is Captain Heung-min Son. The Athletic reported today that Spurs are looking to trigger an option in his contract that will mean his contract will then run until 2026. Overall this season, what have you made of him? Of course, his first season as captain.
Yeah, of course, the argument was there to make him captain. He's given so much at the club for so long, one of the longest serving players at the club, has been brilliant. I've had the pleasure of meeting him. I'm sure you have too. And he is just as lovely as you think he's going to be. Yeah. I spoke to him before the Ajax home game in the Champions League, just before we got to the final, and he was suspended for that game. And I think he was suspended for that game. And he stopped and spoke to me for about 5-10 minutes, and he was just lovely, and there's a reason why he's got great club captain material. And I think he's been good. He's gone out on social media, and I don't know whether it's him writing it or whether it's someone else on his behalf, whatever it is, but this is the statement he wants to make. He's been very, very personable with fans, and I think he's done as good a job as I think he can do. I'm going to upset people here, but my idea of a captain is fire. It's passion. It's like what I was talking about with Lamela, right? And for me, I think that I see Son as an amazing club captain, but when I look at who the captain should be on the pitch, for me, it's Romero. And I know it's one of them.
But let me say though, Josh, wasn't it a superb move from Ange, the fact that he appointed 2 vice captains and a captain, like 3 of them, to make 3 of them feel that like they've got that real responsibility on the pitch? I thought that was a very clever move from Postecoglou.
I think so too, and it's one that I'd not seen before previously at Spurs.
Yeah, yeah.
At the same time, I look at everything that I see from Romero screams captain to me, and when he's worn the armband, I felt that, and there's been that presence. Let's not forget, he is the biggest winner at this football club. He won the World Cup, and he was a crucial part of a team that won the greatest honour in football. He's young. He's still to improve. I think actually, for to a large extent, I think his discipline's massively improved this season.
Yeah,
Other than that Chelsea red card, did he get sent off another time this season? I don't think he did. You know, from where he let us down against AC Milan, it was him against AC Milan, wasn't it? In the 0-0 game, and he got sent off at the end when we looked like we could potentially score. You know, he seems to have matured, and I'm sure he seems to have matured on the pitch, but also in terms of that role that he's taking. It seems to have affected him in a positive way. But I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks I love Son as a club captain. And in many ways, you know, a bit like, you know, like Lloris, and Lloris was the club captain, right? And he was the captain on the pitch. But because he's in goal, there's only so much he can do from that position. So the player that was actually going and speaking to the ref, the player that was actually doing a lot of the stuff in terms of on the pitch. And I know Lloris used to shout a lot, but Kane also was like a captain, even though he didn't have the armband. You felt that kind of presence from him on the pitch. But I feel like for me, I would rather see Son as the club captain, but on the pitch itself, have Romero assume that responsibility.
Josh, Yves Bissouma, do you think he'll stay at the club?
I don't want him to. I'll be honest. I don't want him to. I think he's a player that can command a fee still, but the drop off, it seems like his form dropped off with his dive against Luton. It kind of, after that game, it's never quite been the same. I don't think he's been bad. He's picked it up a lot more towards the end of the season, but I think there are better players out there. And I don't know. When I look at the midfield, and this is the thing, this has been one of the pleasures of this season in many ways, is playing with a midfield three. And you're thinking, are you going to go with Maddison, Sarr, Bentancur, Højbjerg in 1 week, Bissouma in another, Skip could play in there, Lo Celso could play, and there's lots of players. When I pick my first choice three of what we've currently got, let's not forget Bergvall comes in, and that's another midfielder that would play in that three.
Yeah.
Does Bissouma get into that three? No. Does he get into my top four? No. Does he get into my top five? Potentially. But that's where I'm at with it. Is, would I pick Højbjerg over Bissouma? Probably. Personally, I would. I know not everyone will agree with that. Would I pick Maddison, Sarr and Bentancur? Absolutely. Bergvall, we don't know yet, but everything that you see from him, I feel like instinctively I'd want to give him a chance over Bissouma. Oliver Skip is the only one that I probably would pick Bissouma ahead of. So for me, I look at that's a player that can command a fee. I don't think he is a bad player, but I don't think he is going to win us things. Maybe I'm being harsh, but that's just how I feel. I'd like to see him sold. I think we can get a good fee and use that towards getting a better player.
Josh, what have you made of Richarlison in a Spurs shirt since joining from Everton for that big money fee? And do you expect to see him in a Spurs shirt next season? Because I know he's come out and said that he wants to stay in England. Do you think Ange wants him? And if he does stay at Spurs, do you think he is going to be the backup to the new striker that we perhaps do bring in?
Absolutely. I think he'll stay at Spurs. I didn't think this before, but I think that statement is pretty telling. I don't think he comes out and says this. Let's not forget he's, you know, for all the negatives around him, he had a pretty good season compared to what we all expected from him. And he spent a lot of this time injured. He's had operations. You know, he had an operation. He's had time out. with injury, and he's been unlucky with it. He has had a very good season despite all of this. And when he has played, he's had an impact. Even look at the impact that he had when he came on, when he played Anfield. It was a huge impact. And then he got injured after that. But, for me, I look at it and I think there's an element of him probably accepting that he's got to be not a backup. I don't think that's the right word, but in competition with another striker, because he's got his injury problems. And until he sorts those out, you don't know. This could be something that plagues him for the rest of his career, for all we know. So hopefully not. But I think there's an element of that. Let's not forget he's missing the Copa, which he'll be gutted about, because he's a huge name in Brazil. And if he was fully fit, I'm sure he would have gone. But I think this is part of the problem is we can't go another season with just one striker. And Son is not a striker. Son just is not a striker. Every time you play him as a striker, it's not working. It's just not working. He's better off the left, even if he's lost a yard of pace, even if his ball control this season hasn't been what it has been. I think the impact that you can have off Son cutting in on the left, curling one top corner, is far better than what you have from him. One of the great examples is that West Ham game away, where 3 or 4 amazing balls were put in by Brennan Johnson, and he just didn't have the striker's movement. We need 2 strikers at the club. And, I love the under-21s. I love some of these players, but I'm not convinced the likes of Lancashire are ready just yet. Parrott's had a good season on loan. Parrott's had a really good season on loan. But again, he's done that in the Eredivisie, and I just feel like if it was going to happen for him at Spurs, it would have happened. Dane Scarlett, again, I think it seems like he's still liked. But again, I would have expected if he was that good that he was going to be in direct competition with Richarlison.
He couldn't get any game time at Ipswich, Josh. That was the problem, and that loan move seemed to be like a bit of a waste of time. What do you think will actually happen with the likes of Scarlett and Troy Parrott? Because, like you say, Troy Parrott has had a great season in the Dutch league, but it's very different to the Premier League. And I was also going to ask you about a lot of these under-21 players, because of course they've had an outstanding season. But the step up is huge, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, Parrott could command a smallish fee, I think. I'm sure there are championship clubs that would look at him and say, I like a bit of that, because he's gone to a first team and he's played in a competitive European league for one of the worst teams, and he's had a good team. He's had a good season. So there's that. There's a club like Coventry City or Portsmouth even might look at that and say, okay, we'll take a few mil on him. Dane Scarlett didn't have a particularly good loan at Portsmouth, didn't get any game time at Ipswich. Yes, he can be in and around the squad, but if he was really that good that he was going to challenge Richarlison, we'd be seeing him playing already. He hasn't broken through like Harry Kane did. He hasn't broken through like Rashford did at United. Just not seen that from him. And, these players, it feels like they've been 18 for forever. It feels like, how many years have we had Dane Scarlett and Parrott floating around the first team squad? Seems like a lifetime, but they're still quite young, weirdly. It's like they seem to never grow old. I was kind of half expecting them to both be turning 25 soon. But I don't think that's it. I don't think it's it. And let's talk about those under-21 players. Will Lancashire has done more for me to deserve a chance on the bench than Dane Scarlett or Troy Parrott has.
I agree.
Troy Parrott maybe has an argument because he's had a good season, but we can get a fee there. I don't see it. Lancashire deserves a chance on the bench. Mikey Moore, who has bypassed almost this under-21s to come straight into the first team, because that is how good he is. Yeah. I mean, look at how he started this under-17 Euros. The talent is so crazy and off the charts with him that you're having to play him on the bench and give him a few minutes to keep him at the club, because there is not a single club in the world that wouldn't take a Mikey Moore. The likes of Barca, Real Madrid, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, they would all take Mikey Moore. So
well, how does Ange address this situation and problem? And it's a good problem to have, because we've got so many great players coming through, Josh. With players like Jamie Donnelly, for example, if you're not going to give him game time, what do? Keep him in the under-21s? Is it best to loan him out to a championship team? How does Ange address this issue?
Sure. Now it's time for loans. We've won the under-21 PL with a PL2, right? Okay, we can go and win it again, but there's not a lot in that for the players now. They've won that. They've achieved that. They've won silverware for Tottenham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They're the first, I think, to do it, aren't they? At the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to lift that trophy. They've had the fire going and the music and
2 trophies. I saw it myself. It was amazing.
Incredible, right? And now these players are going to be thinking about what's next. And we saw each other at the Fulham game at Craven Cottage. Spurs looked just tired from the Liverpool game before. They just looked knackered. But I did feel like a lot of those players probably weren't ready just yet. There's a handful that I think are. But again, when I say ready, I don't think ready necessarily to be straight in the first team, but ready for a loan. Let's give some examples. Luca Gunter, absolutely superb goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be, and this is the thing, I don't get why Austin's been given a 5-year deal. It makes no sense to me.
He's 25. He's 25. He hasn't not played one single Premier League appearance for Spurs, and he signed a 5-year deal that will take him up to being the age of 30. So
probably decent money. He's probably got the best job in the world. He gets to essentially go to training with top professional footballers, doesn't get any minutes. He might play a friendly here or there, and he gets paid fair whack for it. I mean, he's probably got a dream job. But, for me, I'd rather see Luca Gunter as the third choice goalkeeper in and around that first team, because he's shown a lot of quality. And if he's not going to get that chance, then I think he's definitely one that's capable of going out on loan to the Championship or League One.
Yeah.
And having a season playing, in multiple competitions, whether that be I can't remember what they've called it now, the Johnson's Paint Trophy, whatever that is now. And the same thing for, I think, Jamie Donnelly. I think he needs a championship loan now. I would probably bypass League One because I think he's got a bit too much quality for that. But clubs like QPR, clubs like Watford, wherever it may be, even if it's Oxford United, I don't care. As long as he's playing championship football and given that opportunity. I mean, if Devine can get the loan, and let's not forget, Devine's still under 21s. He's not fully broken into the first team yet. He's had a couple of appearances here and there, but he's not, quite there. Janet mentions Josh Keeley. Josh Keeley's done brilliantly at Barnet, and weirdly, I was sat where I was sat for the start of the game. There was an Irish kind of security guard, and he said, "Where's Josh Keeley?" And I think he was on the bench for this game, I think, if I remember correctly. But he said, in Ireland, people are talking about him. He's meant to be really good. And apparently he's had a very good loan. And it was like, that's interesting hearing someone talking about him that probably doesn't follow Barnet. We've got a lot of options with youth players, but I think now is the time that we've won the PL2. What's the point in going for it again? Let's get some of these players out on loan. I would say Donnelly, I would say Gunter, Dorrington, when he's back from his injury. I think that's probably been a real blow for him in terms of his chances of getting that loan. I think he would have probably got a loan, but he can't because of this injury. So we'll have to see how quickly he recovers from the surgery, which thankfully looks like it went well. Tyrese Hall's another one, but again, I think he's what, 18? So he might be a little bit young for that right now. Maybe League Two, maybe League One. I don't know. And Lancashire's the other one that I think that definitely could do with a loan. So, and those are the ones that I mentioned that right now are the standouts for me from what I've seen.
It was great though, Josh, wasn't it? That a handful of them went to Australia, to Melbourne, to play that game against Newcastle, and they shone. It was great to see.
Absolutely, but this is the quality that we have at the football club, and it's amazing to see. And it was amazing to see some of those go on the plane to Melbourne and then come back and still play in that under 21 game, which I was worried about because I thought, because I texted you saying before, I said, "How are you feeling?" And you said, pretty rough. And I thought, God, how are these players going to feel then?
And I'm just standing there.
They've played a match, and their recovery is essentially on the plane. They must have had masseuses giving them massages and all sorts of the plane. I would love to know what goes on that plane, but you do think that. Do you know what I mean? I kind of was worried about, are they going to do an injury or something? Phillips again. Phillips, trapping ain't dead. You're just scored. That's an interesting. You're just scarred. Interesting name. Phillips is just what we need. Needs to learn his trade under Van der Ven and Romero. Again, he had a brilliant spell at Plymouth. It seemed like every time I looked at Plymouth, he was their highest rated player.
That's exactly what I mean, though, Josh. When you've got a player goes out on loan like that, they're used to playing every single minute, every single game, and then they come back. What's best for someone like Ashley Phillips? Do they try and fight for their place or get the odd League Cup game or the Europa League? 20 minutes at the end of a match or whatever. Does that make a player happy? Or how does that work?
I'm not a player, and I've not been in that situation. So again, I don't know. But if I'm Ashley Phillips, I think Ashley Phillips can save us a centre-back signing for now. If we need to bring one in January, we bring one in January. But I think he can save us a signing right now. He's been so good on loan. And surely, what more do you have to do to earn that opportunity? Certainly, he's going to get pre-season, and then this is another thing that I think Spurs don't tend to do, which I find a little bit weird. Is we don't seem to loan players to Premier League clubs, and I don't understand why. When was the last time Spurs loaned a player? I mean, obviously Reguilon, but it's rare that we loan youngish players to Premier League clubs.
Yeah.
And I wonder why, because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, and I thought this season, Ollie Skip, if he wasn't going to get game time, Luton would be the perfect place to send him. Or Ash Phillips. Why not send him to a club where he's going to have a really hard time in the relegation battle, really fight, And so if not in the first team, then I think Ash Phillips has proven he can play in the Championship now. Why not loan him to a Premier League club? Why not loan him to a Southampton or to an Ipswich? Give him that opportunity.
Yeah.
What's going to be the worst thing that's going to happen? You're not going to judge the player. If Ipswich spend about 25 million or whatever it is, and they have a team that's a bit like Luton that look destined to go down from the start, all you can ask for is, even if he loses every week, is that he gives the heart of some of these Luton players, like your Doughties, like your Ross Barkleys, like your Morrises. And that's enough. I think we'll all take that. If he can learn from that experience, give everything. And this is the difficulty. And this is why I'd like to see Spurs a bit better with the loans, but I'm also a little bit positive because those, the Plymouth loan was a great loan for Phillips. And actually recently we have seemed to do a lot better loans recently. So long may it continue.
It'd be interesting to see if him and Devine actually do go back to Plymouth under Wayne Rooney. Josh, you might want to give me shorter answers because we've got a lot to get through.
Let's do it.
James Maddison, he's been named in the provisional squad for England. Do you think he's going to be on that plane to Germany for Euro 2024?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because I think that there are certain players that have given more in an England shirt that might just pip him to it. Jack Grealish is one of them. And now that Bellingham's in the 10, he's likely to play in the 10. You've got Foden, who's had the season of his life. Cole Palmer, who's been amazing, who wasn't previously in the equation.
Yeah.
I just don't see where he fits into the system. Now, Kobe Mainu that comes in, I don't think we can leave him out the squad now with the way he's kind of thrown himself into the deep end and delivered in big games as well. And he's a more defensive player. I don't know. I just don't think there's room now. Declan Rice showing that he can play a more progressive midfield role as well. Yeah, I just don't see there being room, unfortunately. But I'm not complaining because I think that means a fit and firing and possibly motivated Maddison for next season.
Josh, you mentioned as soon as you come on this stream about looking forward to the Euros. Let's talk about England for a second, because do you think this 2024, is it the year that we finally see England lift a trophy?
It's like Spurs until I see it. I can't believe it. I can't believe we will ever win anything unless I see it.
I'll tell you what, it's hard. It's hard sometimes supporting Spurs and following England the way that I do.
Same thing. It's like the same thing.
Sometimes it is. A lot of the time it is.
It's an extension of the same.
It's got to happen one day. And when you think of the squad, you've mentioned some of the players there. When you think the squad that England have got now, the talent in this team, in this squad, surely it's got to be. And if Southgate does not guide England this year, do you think that's him done?
Has to be him done. Has to be him done because, well, not to take a musical or a player's gospel, but I went to this Dear England at the West End, and it's one of the few things that my girlfriend was willing to accept football. So this was a compromise. This was something that she liked in a musical and a show, and me football. So there was 3 phases that they talked about in Dear England, and I'm not taking this for gospel, but phase 1 was the first World Cup. That was Russia. Phase 2, Qatar. This is phase 3, the next tournament. Look, it's like if now, when, because we've got an amazing opportunity. Everyone, the amount of amazing players in great form. The goal contributions, Ollie Watkins, Harry Kane having a great year, even if there was no trophies. Foden, Palmer, Saka, Rice, magnificent. Maguire looked a lot better towards the end as well. Branthwaite's had a really exciting year. Carl Walker, amazing as always. Trippier had another strong year. Pickford is brilliant. I look at this and we've got the perfect balance of youth and experience now that I think it's got to be now. Germany is going to be a lot tougher than I think people are going to give them credit for in a home tournament. France will be strong as always. I think it's between those 3. I really do. Maybe the Netherlands might show up. Maybe Van Dijk, Van de Ven is the defensive partnership that they've been waiting for all this time with Ake at left back, and I'm going to have the pleasure of watching Mickey in action against Austria in Berlin. If now, it's got to be.
People are always so honest when it comes down to money. So if you had your last £100 and you had to put it on a team to win the Euros, who would it be?
France on experience alone. France. Can I use that £100? Can I go £50 each way on England? if I'm going to be smart, I'm going to go £50 each way on England. I think England has as good a chance as anyone to win this, but it's bloody England, and it's like Spurs, and it's the same thing on repeat, and it's torture until it actually comes home. I think it's actually when we start singing "It's Coming Home," that's when it all goes wrong. So, yeah, I think this is as good a chance. But I'm thinking about the 2026 World Cup. We're winning that, so who cares? To win it in Germany as well, actually, that's a good point. To win it in Germany would be even better.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. Brian Hill, Emerson Royale, would you expect both of them to go out the door?
Yes, absolutely. Don't think we're going to get a huge amount of money. But I think Emerson will get a good club. Look at the clubs interested in him. Looks like AC Milan is advancing a little bit there. Hill will go back to Spain almost certainly. So, yeah, I expect those to be wrapped up actually pretty quickly.
Josh, what about Giovanni Lo Celso? Because I think you and I have spoken about Lo Celso at length over the last couple of years that you've been coming on this channel. I actually believe that he's probably had his best season at Spurs this season under Postecoglou, but he hasn't had that many minutes still. He's been here a long time. He's worked under various different managers. He's had a couple of loans. What does the future hold for him now?
I don't know, because the last I heard, Spurs were looking to try and offer him a new contract, which just seems absolutely baffling considering that he's not getting minutes, because I don't seem to recall a time this season where he's been bad on the pitch. Every time he's been on the pitch, he seems to have done really well and impacted games. Just look at when Maddison was injured. He was one of the real, he was one of the real shining lights. But yeah, look, I see this comment saying about stop buying injury-prone players, but Lo Celso's not actually spent much time at all this season injured. He's been fit for most of it. He's just been sat on the bench, and when he's been fit, he's still not getting the minutes. And this is the thing. I agree. I think he's had one of the best seasons so far. I think he's been consistent. I would keep him all day long. But the only justification for getting rid of Lo Celso, in my eyes, is if you bring in someone like Eze. Then I see the sense in that, because, okay, he's just not going to get the minutes. And that be that. But let's also think about little squad dynamics here and there, right? And you lose Emerson. You potentially lose Richarlison, but I know Højbjerg's very close. They've got this kind of weird South American group, which also weirdly contains Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, and it used to contain Ivan Perisic. It's quite, you look on social media, they're together all the time. To take Lo Celso away, to take Emerson away, to take Højbjerg away, Perisic is already gone. If you're a player like Romero, does that make you feel a little bit unsettled if you lose some of your kind of closest mates? I don't know. I'm not a footballer. I don't want to speculate too much, but I think there has to be probably an element of trying to keep people happy as well, and balance and address those kind of balances. Because I'm sure, at the end of the day, we like to think of footballers as robots, but they are humans. And if you take anyone in a work environment and you get rid of all their mates, how are you going to approach that situation? It might be slightly different. I don't know. So I think the Lo Celso situation is going to be really telling. I think if Lo Celso is going to go, we're going to get rid of him early. And then that's a clear indication, okay, we're going to go for an Eze, we're going to go for a Gallagher or a Gibbs White or whoever. And at least there's a clear message there. I just don't want it to be a situation where Lo Celso has a great preseason, which I'm sure he would do at Spurs. And then we see a Sergio Reguilon situation where all of a sudden he thinks everything's fine, and then all of a sudden they want him out at the end of the window, and then we don't have time to replace him. Because I think,
Yeah, in my personal opinion, Josh, I think it's better for the football club and Lo Celso that, they go out their separate ways, because although, as I said, I think Lo Celso's had a good season, one of his best at Spurs. He should have been given more game time. I just can't see him making that impact under Ange going forward. Pedro Porro not being named in the Spain squad, is that harsh?
Do you know what? Weirdly, I can talk about this a little bit, because I was at one of their most recent games, Spain-Colombia, working that game. And Porro played that day, and he was superb for them. They lost the game 1-0 to Colombia, but he was not the reason for that. And, okay, he had a bit of a torrid time for a little bit when when Luis Diaz came on, but that's, Luis Diaz does that to a lot of people. Yeah, I think that sure, he's had a great season, but they'll have their own. It's De La Fuentes, I think his name is, the Spain coach, will have his own his own ideas. And, you know, I think it's harsh, but again, I take it as a positive. One less player to get injured, one more player that's going to be even more motivated to improve. And I think that whereas he's probably not my player of the season, he certainly would win my award for most improved player this season. And yeah, it's a hunger thing. I think he's going to be hungry, and I think actually, do you know what? Fair play to him for the way that he responded to it. I don't know if you read his statement.
Absolutely,
it was top notch. It was, to paraphrase, you know, along the lines of saying that from now until the end of the tournament, he is Spain's biggest supporter, and it shows there's the right character there. So yeah, harsh, but I'm not going to complain as a Spurs fan.
Josh, what do you think the future holds for Jed Spence? I mentioned earlier that, you know, Genoa do have the buy option of £8.5 million, but they don't want to spend that sort of money, but they want to keep the player. Do you think he was unfairly treated at Tottenham, or do you think there's any chance of him coming back and playing under Postecoglou?
He seems to, from what I've been told, he seems to have actually done pretty well at Genoa.
Yeah.
And I kind of would expect them to sign him permanently, and that be that. He's not got a future at Spurs, no way. And I think Ange was clear from the start. He didn't rate his attitude. He didn't, you know, when you look at his career, it's one of those players with all the ability in the world, but you have to question why consistently managers fall out with him or don't rate him. Why Steve Cooper was the only one that got the best out of him. So yeah, for me, that we can end the conversation there on Spence. You know, great ability, and I wish him the best, but there's no way he's got a future. I would be stunned.
Josh, what do you think will happen with Aleko Veliz? Because, of course, he come in, had very limited game time under Ange, gone out on loan, hasn't had really any minutes. Will he come back? Do you think Spurs will look to loan him out again? Because, you know, we mentioned players, you know, earlier, Troy Parrott, Dane Scarlett. Of course, you've got all the under-21 lads coming through, done extremely well this season. Spurs looking to sign another striker. Veliz, when is he going to get game time at Tottenham? What's the plan there, do you think?
Yeah, I think he was obviously brought in as one for the future. You know, to be the only player under the age of 20 to score 10 plus goals in the Argentinian league. I mean, it's a great achievement for a young player. Still very raw. Obviously, Quique Sanchez Flores has come under a lot of stick. He's been really under fire at Sevilla for his treatment of Veliz, and it was almost, there's been reports in the Spanish press that Veliz was brought in purely as a means for him to make a point to the board and for him to try and get demands to the board and to do with conflict there. It's been detrimental to him. It's been a horrible loan for him. He's not getting played. He's been almost like completely forgotten since joining. I think he'll still benefit from being around a first team with a lot of quality. But for me, and I'm sure there's elements of his game he can learn from the likes of En-Nesyri, the Moroccan striker, who is, you know, quite big frame. There's a lot of similarities there in terms of what he can become. But yeah, for me, it makes me skeptical. I was not in favour of him going to Sevilla in the first place. I wanted to see him go to a Championship or Premier League club, because I thought, well, what use is this, him learning Premier League football in Spain? It's just not. And to me, it screams the start of, you know, perhaps the next Brian Hill situation. I hope not, because actually my last memory of him was him getting that goal against Brighton. We're getting battered. Yeah. He celebrated it like it was a winner. You know, it showed how much it meant to him, and he actually looked pretty good then. Maybe the best option for him, if we're not going to get a suitable loan, then I'd rather keep him in the squad, get rid of Scarlett and Parrott, and have him as a third choice that will play in the Carabao Cup. You know, I mean, for me, Carabao Cup is a write-off. If we can do well in that, great. But I'm far more keen to do well in the FA Cup and the Europa League. if I'm going to prioritise the cups in order, as in, aside from the league, it would be Europa League, FA Cup, Carabao Cup. But, he should get minutes. And let's not forget, Richarlison will get injured again, almost certainly. There might be a time where we end up with 2 players injured, because how many times have Spurs been in that situation where we had both Kane and Richarlison injured and we needed someone else to play? Son needed to then play up top. He will get his opportunity. So if he's not gonna get a loan, I think actually him playing in the under-21s and him playing in the Premier League, even as if it's off the bench or in cup games, I think he'll benefit a lot more than he has with that current loan spell, because that was just shambles.
Josh, lastly, today it was announced by Spurs that they've got a friendly in Scotland where we'll be playing Hearts. Of course, the other day they mentioned that we've got a friendly against Queen's Park Rangers as well at Loftus Road. So it's great to have friendlies on our home turf again. Of course, we then go out to Japan, play a friendly there, one in South Korea against Bayern Munich. And then, of course, we come back to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, play Bayern Munich again. So 5 friendlies set up ahead of the 2024-2025 season. What do you make of those fixtures and the preparation ahead of the new campaign?
Well, I think it's nice to have them on home turf. I had a brilliant time at Rangers at Ibrox for that friendly. Was it the Walter Tull Cup? I think it was, if I remember.
Another
correctly. Trophy. And, this is another, I think this is a 150th anniversary match, this Hearts game.
Yeah.
But, and it's also a bit of a throwback, because we played them in the Europa League qualifiers, didn't we, Hearts? I think that's the last time we went to Tynecastle was, if I remember correctly, it was 2011, 2011-12 season, and we won 5-0 against them. Yeah, that's nice. QPR, even better. I mean, that's West London. I'm in West London, so that's a nice, easy one for me. And then Japan, it's nice because we're going to be playing. We're playing Yokohama Marinos, right?
No, no, it's not. It's Kobe.
Oh, Vissel Kobe.
That's
the team that Iniesta went to. Yeah. So either way, I mean, it's a new market. I can't remember. Has Spurs ever been to Japan before? I don't seem to recall it. You'll know better than me, because if they have, you would have probably been with them there. But either way, I mean, it's another place that Ange has been. We're not there for all that long, are we? I think it's only for a short period of time.
I've got a feeling, Josh, that they'll probably try and put another one in South Korea. I'd be amazed if we go all that way to Japan for one game and South Korea only for one game. I think that they will probably sneak another game in there somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully not the bloody Tiger Cup again in Singapore. I remember we were just laughing about that at the time. And you were there, weren't you, in Thailand when the game got rained off?
I tell you, the smile on my face when I saw that we'll be travelling up to only Edinburgh, which is a very short flight, and then the QPR one, because I was only saying this the other day. Back in the day, we used to play teams like Colchester and Swindon and Oxford and such like, for pre-season games. So it's great, I think, to have a couple of games here before the first team do go off to Japan and South Korea. But I can certainly see why they go to these places. And when I was in Australia last week, a crowd of nearly 80,000 for a post-season friendly was simply incredible. And what it meant to the Australian fans, they absolutely loved it. So I can certainly see why Spurs do it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, because this is one of the rare things that I have no idea about. We're playing Bayern Munich twice.
Yeah.
We're playing them in Korea, and then we're playing them at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Yeah, that's unusual.
So that's going to be, which is weird, but that could be about 14-2 to Bayern Munich on aggregate.
Yeah.
You're going to get Harry Kane and Eric Dyer against Spurs twice. Great. I thought that the friendly at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was going to be hard enough for all of us. But yeah, I mean, we're playing, I think it's the 27th of July and then the 3rd of August. Yeah, I would be surprised if we didn't squeeze one in. I hope we get another K-League All-Stars or whatever, because
that's exactly what I think will happen. Yeah.
Because that was such a fun game. I seem to recall Harry Kane actually scored a free kick for us that game. And it was about 6-2 or 6-3 or something like that. I remember watching it in work on my phone, and I shouldn't have been doing it. I should have been focusing on work. But I ended up streaming the game on my phone. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I have no issue with Spurs going to Korea. I just think it's a damn sight better than going to Australia again. Although, actually, no, wait, we've already done that in a post-season friendly. It's just the constant chopping and changing. As long as, South Korea to, Japan to Seoul is quite a short flight, isn't it? Only a couple of hours. Yep. So that's a lot better than going to Perth and then to Thailand, then to Singapore. And, that was just a mess last pre-season when Ange was trying to come in and we're trying to get players embedded. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty happy with the pre-season. And it's good to see us sticking to one part of the world until they announce we're playing someone in India or something instead.
Josh, last question for you. Just give me two numbers. How many players you think we'll bring in the door during the summer? And you can count Timo Werner as one. And how many players will go out the door before the season starts?
6 players in, 9 players out.
Wow, that is a busy summer.
It's going to be busy. We all know it is. We know it's going to be busy. I just hope we get all this flurry of excitement at the start, and then we can just crack on with, the rest of the summer.
Yeah,
we've got the Euros, we've got the Olympics. I want to enjoy them, not stressing about what Spurs are or aren't doing. I want us to get all the players in early. It would be, do you know what would be really nice? What would be really nice is to get 1 or 2 deals agreed before the Euros as well.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah,
you need a bit more than 6. I'm also actually 7, including Bergvall as well, but 5 more players I think to come in. It's going to be busy. It's going to be busy for sure.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining me. I did warn people that this is going to be a long podcast, and believe me, when Josh and I get together, we can talk about Spurs all night long. And I honestly could talk to you for hours, Josh, about Tottenham. So thank you so much for joining me again. Hopefully, you'll be back on the channel very soon. Where can people find you and what you're up to at the moment?
At Josh Hughes TV, gearing up for the Euros at Mail Sport. It's going to be a crazy summer. And we're going to be in Germany. We're going to be in and around.
You're out there, yeah?
Well, I'm going for a week to watch one of the round of 16 games and watching Netherlands, Austria. I'm going as a fan, but almost certainly I'll end up having to do probably some work out there because I can't help myself and I can't stay away. But then we'll be in and around covering fan reaction here as well. We're going to be bringing you every single game, every single moment. And at Josh Hughes TV on Twitter and on Instagram. But then other than that, Mail Sport. And once again, thank you so much for having me on. Always a pleasure. I'm amazed that we've kept it under 2 hours because I think the last few have been over. It's quite
Josh, thank you so much. And everyone, please do go over and see Josh's social media channels and hit that follow button. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And hopefully it is going to be a busy summer as Josh is predicting. Many players in, many players out. We'll be covering it all on this channel. And hopefully we will see England lift a trophy in 2024 next month. Wouldn't that be lovely? Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And until the next time, come on, you Spurs.